The morning sun painted the harbor in shades of gold as Keisha walked toward the marina. She had been looking forward to this day for weeks. Her company was hosting their annual team-building event on a charter boat, and for once, she felt genuinely excited about a work function. Keisha had joined Peterson Marketing 3 months ago as their new digital marketing specialist. The job was everything she had hoped for: challenging projects, good pay, and the chance to work with major clients. But if she was being honest, the social side of work had been a struggle. She was one of only 2 black employees in the entire company, and sometimes the office felt more like a private club than a workplace. Her coworkers were polite enough during meetings and project discussions. They said good morning when they passed her desk and included her in work-related conversations. But when it came to lunch plans, after-work drinks, or casual conversations by the coffee machine, Keisha often felt invisible. She would see groups forming for social activities, but somehow the invitations never seemed to reach her desk. That's why today felt different. This boat trip was supposed to be about bringing everyone together. No work pressures, no deadlines, just a chance to relax and get to know each other better. Keisha had bought a new sundress for the occasion and spent extra time on her hair that morning. She wanted to make a good impression and finally break through that invisible wall she felt at the office. The charter boat was impressive. A sleek white vessel called Ocean Dreams that could easily hold 50 people. The company had rented it for the entire afternoon, complete with catered lunch and an open bar. As Keisha walked up the gangplank, she could already hear laughter and music coming from the deck. The first person she saw was Lisa from accounting, who gave her a warm smile and a quick wave. That felt encouraging. Then she spotted Tom from the creative department, who actually walked over to say hello. "Keisha, you made it. Isn't this boat amazing?" Tom seemed genuinely happy to see her. "Have you grabbed a drink yet?" The bar is set up near the back. For the first time in months, Keisha felt like she might actually belong here. She made her way through the crowd, exchanging greetings with coworkers who seemed more relaxed and friendly than she had ever seen them at the office. Maybe it was the ocean air, or maybe people just needed to get away from their desks to remember how to be human with each other. The boat pulled away from the dock right on schedule, and Keisha found herself standing at the railing, watching the shoreline slowly shrink into the distance. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly ahead of them, a brilliant blue that seemed to go on forever. She pulled out her phone to take a picture, thinking her sister would love to see this. "Beautiful day for a boat ride, isn't it?" Keisha turned to find Rebecca from Human Resources standing beside her. Rebecca had always been professional but distant at work, so this friendly approach felt like progress. "It really is," Keisha replied. "I've never been on a boat this nice before. The company really went all out. Oh, they do this every year. It's one of the perks of working here. You'll love it." Rebecca smiled and moved on to chat with someone else, but the brief conversation left Keisha feeling more optimistic. The first hour passed pleasantly. Keisha found herself in several different conversations, talking about everything from weekend plans to favorite Netflix shows. She even managed to make a few people laugh with a story about her disastrous attempt at surfing lessons. For the first time since starting this job, she felt like she was just another member of the team instead of an outsider looking in. The catered lunch was served on the upper deck, and Keisha managed to find a seat at a table with some of the younger employees from the marketing department. The conversation flowed easily as they shared stories about college, travel experiences, and their career goals. She was actually having fun, something she hadn't expected when she woke up that morning. But as the afternoon wore on, Keisha began to notice a shift in the atmosphere. The open bar was clearly popular, and some people were taking full advantage of it. Voices were getting louder, laughter was becoming more boisterous, and she could see that several of her coworkers were well on their way to being seriously drunk. That's when she first noticed Derek Peterson, the company owner's nephew who worked as a senior manager in client relations. Derek was holding court near the bar, telling increasingly loud stories to a small group of male colleagues. Even from across the deck, Keisha could hear his voice carrying over the ocean breeze. She had had limited interactions with Derek at the office. He was the type who seemed to think his family connection made him untouchable, and his behavior often reflected that attitude. He was known for making inappropriate comments that somehow never quite crossed the line enough to get him in serious trouble. HR complaints about Derek had a way of getting buried or dismissed. As Keisha watched, Derek's stories seemed to be getting more animated, and his language more colorful. She noticed that the group around him was growing smaller as people drifted away, but Derek didn't seem to notice or care. He just kept talking, gesturing wildly with his drink in hand. Keisha decided to move to the other side of the boat, away from the increasingly rowdy group. She found a quiet spot near the bow where she could enjoy the ocean view and the gentle spray of salt water. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and for a moment, she let herself relax completely. She was checking her phone when she heard footsteps behind her. Thinking it might be Tom or one of her other co-workers coming to join her, she turned with a smile. But her smile faded when she saw Derek approaching, drink in hand and a strange expression on his face. "Well, well," Derek said, his words slightly slurred. "Look who's hiding out up here all by herself." Something in his tone made Keisha's stomach tighten. This wasn't the casual, friendly conversation she had been having with her other co-workers. There was an edge to Derek's voice that she didn't like. "Just enjoying the view," she replied carefully, keeping her tone neutral. "It's beautiful out here." "Oh, I bet you're enjoying it," Derek said, moving closer. "Probably the nicest boat you've ever been on, right?" The comment hit Keisha like a slap. The implication was clear, and it hurt more than she wanted to admit. Here she was, thinking she was finally being accepted as part of the team, and Derek was reminding her that some people still saw her as an outsider who didn't belong. She could feel her good mood evaporating, replaced by a familiar knot of tension in her chest. This was exactly the kind of moment she had been dreading, and now it was happening on what was supposed to be a fun, team-building day. The ocean suddenly seemed less beautiful, and the boat felt much smaller than it had just moments before. Keisha forced herself to stay calm, even though Derek's comment had stung. She had dealt with people like him before, and she knew that reacting emotionally would only make things worse. The best strategy was usually to stay professional and remove herself from the situation as quickly as possible. "I think I'll go grab some lunch," she said, starting to move away from him, but Derek stepped sideways, blocking her path. "What's the rush? We never get to talk at the office. This is our chance to get to know each other better." The way he said it made Keisha's skin crawl. There was something predatory in his expression that went beyond simple workplace rudeness. She could smell the alcohol on his breath and realized he was much more intoxicated than she had initially thought. "I really should get back to the others," she said firmly, trying to step around him. Again, Derek moved to block her. "Come on, don't be unfriendly. We're all teammates here, right? Well, most of us anyway." He laughed at his own joke, but there was no humor in his eyes. Keisha felt her heart rate beginning to increase. They were at the front of the boat, away from most of the other passengers. She could hear voices and laughter from the main deck area, but it felt very far away. The boat's engine and the sound of waves against the hull would make it difficult for anyone to hear her if she called out. "Derek, I think you've had a bit too much to drink," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe you should go get some food and coffee." "Are you telling me what to do?" Derek's tone shifted, becoming more aggressive. "That's pretty bold for someone who just started working here. You might want to watch your attitude." The threat was barely veiled, and Keisha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. This was escalating beyond uncomfortable workplace harassment into something much more dangerous. "I'm not trying to tell you anything," she replied carefully. "I just think we should both get back to the party." "Maybe I don't want to go back to the party yet," Derek said, moving even closer. "Maybe I want to have a private conversation about how things work around here." Keisha took a step backward, but she was already close to the boat's railing. There wasn't much room to retreat, and Derek seemed to realize this. A smile spread across his face, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "You know, I've been watching you since you started," he continued, "acting like you belong here, trying to fit in with everyone. But we both know the truth, don't we?" "I don't know what you mean," Keisha said. Though she had a terrible feeling she knew exactly what he meant. "Sure you do. You're here because of some diversity program, right? Company needed to check a box, so they hired you. But that doesn't mean you, truly belong here." The words hit Keisha like physical blows. She had worked incredibly hard to get her position, graduating at the top of her marketing program and earning excellent recommendations from previous internships. But Derek was voicing the fear that haunted her quiet moments, that people saw her as a token hire rather than a qualified professional. "That's not true," she said, but her voice sounded weaker than she intended. "Of course it's true." Derek said with a cruel laugh. Look around. Do you see anyone else who looks like you? That's not an accident. This company has a certain culture, and frankly, you're disrupting it. Keisha's hands were shaking now, both from anger and fear. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to point out her qualifications and achievements. But she was also becoming increasingly aware of how isolated they were on this part of the boat. I'm going back to join the others now, she said, trying to project more confidence than she felt. No, I don't think you are, Derek said, and this time he didn't just block her path, he grabbed her arm. The contact was like an electric shock. Keisha had been holding on to hope that this was just verbal harassment, unpleasant but manageable. But now Derek had crossed into physical contact and every instinct she had was screaming danger. Let go of me, she said, trying to pull her arm free. Derek's grip tightened. We're not done talking yet. I think you need to understand your place here. My place? Keisha's fear was beginning to transform into anger. What exactly do you think my place is? Well, it's certainly not in our office acting like you're one of us, Derek sneered. Maybe it's time someone reminded you where you really belong. The racial undertones in his words were becoming impossible to ignore. Keisha realized with growing horror that this wasn't just about workplace politics or personal dislike. Derek's hostility was rooted in something much darker and more dangerous. She looked around desperately, hoping to catch someone's attention from the main deck. But the boat's design meant that the bow area was hidden from view of the party. Even if she screamed, she wasn't sure anyone would hear her over the music and conversation. People will notice if I'm gone too long, she said, hoping to make Derek think twice about whatever he was planning. Will they, though? Derek asked with a mock thoughtful expression. I mean, you spend most of your time at work sitting alone anyway. I don't think anyone would really miss you. The comment was designed to hurt, and it succeeded. Keisha felt tears stinging her eyes as Derek voiced her deepest insecurity about her place at the company. But beneath the hurt, anger was building. You don't know anything about me, she said. I know enough, Derek replied. I know you don't belong here, and I know someone needs to teach you that lesson. His grip on her arm was becoming painful now, and Keisha could see bruises forming under his fingers. She tried again to pull away, but Derek was bigger and stronger than she was. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to understand the natural order of things, Derek said. Some people are meant to lead and others are meant to follow. Some people belong in places like this and others should know better than to try. As he spoke, Derek began pulling her toward the boat's railing. Keisha's fear spiked as she realized what he might be thinking. They were in the middle of the ocean, miles from shore. Even if she was a strong swimmer, the water was cold and the boat was moving fast. Derek, stop, she said, real panic creeping into her voice now. This is crazy. You're going to get in serious trouble. Trouble? Derek laughed. Who's going to cause trouble for me? You? I don't think so. My uncle owns this company, remember? And who are people going to believe? A respected manager or some diversity hire who probably made up a story because she couldn't handle constructive feedback. The calculation in his words was almost more frightening than the physical threat. Derek wasn't acting on pure impulse. He had thought this through. He believed he could get away with whatever he was planning to do. Keisha's mind raced as she tried to figure out how to escape the situation. Derek was drunk, which might slow his reflexes, but he was also bigger and currently had the advantage of positioning. She needed to find a way to get past him and back to safety, but she also needed to be smart about it. Please, she said, deciding to try appealing to whatever humanity might be left in him. I haven't done anything to hurt you. I'm just trying to do my job. Your job, Derek repeated mockingly. Yeah, well, maybe it's time you found a different job, somewhere more appropriate. As he spoke, Derek pulled her closer to the railing, and Keisha could feel the spray of ocean water on her face. The boat was moving fast enough that falling overboard would be like hitting concrete. Even if the impact didn't kill her, being left behind in the middle of the ocean certainly would. Keisha's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the sound of the waves. Derek's grip on her arm was getting tighter, and he was pulling her steadily toward the boat's edge. The white foam churning past the hull looked deadly from this angle. Derek, please think about what you're doing, she said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the terror coursing through her. This isn't you. You're drunk and you're going to do something you'll regret. Regret? Derek laughed, but there was no warmth in the sound. The only thing I regret is that it took this long for someone to put you in your place. He yanked her forward another step, and now Keisha was close enough to the railing that she could feel the wind whipping off the ocean. One more step and Derek would be able to push her over without much effort. "Help!" she screamed as loudly as she could, hoping someone from the main deck might hear her. Derek's face darkened with anger. "Shut up," he hissed, pressing his hand over her mouth. "Nobody's coming to save you. They're all too busy having fun to notice one person missing." Keisha bit down on his hand as hard as she could. Derek yelped and pulled his hand away, giving her a moment to scream again. "Somebody help me. Please." But the music from the party was loud, and the sound of the boat's engines drowned out her voice. Even if someone did hear something, they might just think it was part of the general celebration. "You're going to pay for that," Derek snarled, raising his free hand as if to hit her. Keisha flinched, but the blow never came. Instead, Derek seemed to reconsider, looking around to make sure they were still alone. "You know what? Maybe a slap isn't enough," he said with a cruel smile. "Maybe you need a lesson you'll never forget, assuming you survive to remember it." The threat was crystal clear now. Derek wasn't just trying to intimidate her or assert dominance. He was actually planning to throw her overboard, into the churning ocean water that would almost certainly kill her. "You can't be serious," Keisha whispered. "You can't actually be thinking about murder." "Murder?" Derek laughed again. "Who said anything about murder? This would be an accident. Poor girl had too much to drink at the company party, got careless near the railing and fell overboard. Very tragic, very unfortunate, but certainly not anyone's fault." The premeditation in his words was terrifying. Derek had clearly thought this through, at least as much as his alcohol-soaked brain was capable of planning. He actually believed he could kill her and get away with it. "People will know it wasn't an accident," Keisha said desperately. "They'll investigate." "Will they, though?" Derek asked with mock concern. "I mean, you haven't exactly been the life of the party. You've been kind of antisocial, actually, wandering off by yourself, not really connecting with the team. It would be perfectly believable that you had a few drinks, came up here alone to sulk, and accidentally fell over." Keisha's mind was racing, trying to find some way out of this nightmare. Derek was positioned between her and the only escape route back to the main deck. The ocean was behind her, and Derek's grip on her arm meant she couldn't make a sudden break for freedom. "My family will know something happened," she said. "They'll ask questions? Maybe," Derek shrugged. "But families of accident victims always look for someone to blame. Doesn't mean anyone will listen to them, especially when the alternative explanation is so much more believable." As Derek spoke, he continued pulling her toward the railing. Keisha was fighting back, trying to dig her heels in. But the deck was slippery from ocean spray and Derek was stronger than she was. Besides, Derek continued conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather instead of her imminent death. "Even if someone did suspect something, who are they going to investigate? The grieving coworkers who tried to help search for you? The company that immediately offered to help with funeral expenses? Or maybe they'll investigate the respected manager who was clearly visible at the party when the accident happened." Keisha realized that Derek had an alibi planned too. He could push her overboard, return to the party, and pretend to be shocked when someone eventually noticed she was missing. By the time anyone realized she was gone, the boat would be miles away from where she fell. "You won't get away with this," she said, but even to her own ears the words sounded hollow. "Actually, I think I will," Derek replied confidently. "And you know what the best part is? Even if someone did suspect something, they'd never be able to prove it. It would just be another unsolved mystery, another tragic accident at sea." Derek's grip shifted, and suddenly he had both hands on her, preparing to lift her over the railee. Keisha could see the ocean rushing past below, and she knew that if she went over, she would die. The boat was moving too fast for anyone to rescue her, and the cold water would sap her strength within minutes. "Wait," she gasped. "Derek, please. Think about your family. Think about your future. You can't throw your whole life away because of some workplace grudge." "Grudge?" Derek paused, looking genuinely offended. "This isn't about a grudge. This is about maintaining standards. This company has a reputation to protect. By committing murder, by removing problems before they get worse," Derek corrected. "You're a problem, Keisha. You don't fit in here, you never will, and your presence is making everyone uncomfortable. I'm just solving the problem." The casual way he talked about killing her was perhaps the most frightening thing of all. In Derek's mind, she wasn't a person with rights and dreams and people who loved her. She was just an obstacle to be removed. People at the party saw us talking, Keisha tried desperately. They'll remember that you came up here after me. Did they, though? Derek asked with another cruel smile. I mean, people are pretty drunk down there. And like I said, you've been antisocial all day. I don't think anyone was paying that much attention to your comings and goings. Derek was probably right. Keisha had been so focused on trying to fit in that she hadn't really connected with anyone at the party. If Derek was careful about when he returned to the group, he might be able to convince everyone that he had been there the whole time. Please, she whispered, making one last appeal. I have a family. People who love me. You can't just take that away. Sure I can, Derek said simply. And I'm about to. He lifted her suddenly, and for a terrifying moment, Keisha felt herself leaving the deck. The ocean rushed up toward her, and she was certain this was the end. She was going to die out here, and Derek was going to get away with it. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of throwing her cleanly over the railing, Derek stumbled slightly. His alcohol-impaired coordination betrayed him at the crucial moment, and instead of launching her into the ocean, he merely slammed her against the railing. The impact knocked the wind out of Keisha, but it also loosened Derek's grip on her. For the first time since this nightmare began, she had a chance to fight back. And unlike Derek, she hadn't been drinking all afternoon. Her mind was clear, her reflexes were sharp, and she was fighting for her life. Everything was about to change. When Derek stumbled and loosened his grip, Keisha's survival instincts kicked in with a clarity that surprised her. All the fear and panic that had been clouding her mind suddenly crystallized into pure focus. She had one chance to save herself, and she wasn't going to waste it. Instead of trying to run, which Derek would expect, Keisha did something that caught him completely off guard. She stepped toward him, not away. Derek's eyes widened in confusion. He had been expecting her to cower or try to escape, not advance on him. The alcohol had slowed his thinking, and he couldn't process this unexpected response quickly enough to react. Keisha grabbed Derek's wrist with both hands and twisted hard, using a move her brother had taught her years ago during a self-defense class. Derek yelped in pain and instinctively pulled back, but Keisha held on, using his own momentum against him. The combination of Derek's drunken stumble, his sudden backward motion, and Keisha's leverage sent him tumbling backward onto the deck. He landed hard on his back, the wind knocked out of him and his drink flying across the deck. For a moment, Derek just lay there, stunned and gasping for breath. He clearly hadn't expected any resistance from Keisha, let alone effective resistance. In his mind, she had been a helpless victim, and now his entire worldview was being challenged. Keisha stood over him, breathing hard, but finally feeling like she had some control over the situation. She could run now, get back to the safety of the main deck, and report what had happened. But something held her in place. Maybe it was anger at everything Derek had said and done. Maybe it was frustration at months of workplace harassment and microaggressions. Maybe it was just the adrenaline from nearly being murdered. Whatever it was, Keisha found herself speaking with a calm, clear voice that she barely recognized as her own. Let me tell you something, Derek, she said, looking down at him as he struggled to catch his breath. You made a lot of assumptions about me tonight. You assumed I was weak. You assumed I was alone. You assumed I wouldn't fight back. And you were wrong about all of it. Derek tried to sit up, but Keisha took a step closer, and something in her posture made him think better of it. You also assumed that you could get away with attempted murder because of who you are and who I am, Keisha continued. But you made one crucial mistake in your planning. What? What are you talking about? Derek gasped. Keisha reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked from when Derek had grabbed her, but it was still functional. And more importantly, it had been recording the entire conversation. I started recording when you first approached me, she said calmly. Old habit from my previous job. When someone starts acting aggressive, I document it. So I have everything, Derek. Every threat, every racial slur, every detail of your plan to kill me and cover it up. Derek's face went pale as the implications sank in. You can't. That's not legal. Actually, it is, Keisha said. California is a two-party consent state for private conversations, but we're in a public area of a boat with other people nearby. Plus, I was recording for my own protection during what I reasonably believed was a threatening situation. Any lawyer will tell you that's completely legal. Derek struggled to his feet, but he was clearly shaken. The power dynamic had completely reversed, and he seemed to be sobering up quickly as reality set in. "But here's the thing," Keisha continued, her voice still eerily calm. "I'm not just some random person you can intimidate and threaten. You made another assumption about me that was completely wrong." "What do you mean?" "You assumed I was hired because of some diversity program, that I wasn't qualified for my position. But you never bothered to actually look at my background, did you?" Derek said nothing, but his expression suggested he was beginning to realize he had made a serious error. "I graduated summa cum laude from USC with a degree in marketing and a minor in communications law," Keisha said. "I spent 3 years working for a civil rights law firm before I decided to transition into corporate marketing. And before that, I spent 4 years in college documenting harassment cases and helping students navigate the legal system." Derek's eyes were getting wider as she spoke. "So not only do I know exactly what laws you've broken tonight, I also know exactly what evidence I need to prove it. And I know exactly which authorities to contact and how to present this case in a way that will be impossible to dismiss or cover up. Look, Keisha," Derek said, his voice much less confident than it had been moments before, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just joking around. Maybe I had a little too much to drink, but I never actually intended to hurt you." "Really?" Keisha asked, her tone conversational. Because my recording has you clearly stating your intention to throw me overboard and make it look like an accident. You described your whole plan, Derek. You talked about my funeral expenses and how you would act surprised when people noticed I was missing." Derek's face was now completely white. But I didn't actually do anything." "You're fine. Nothing really happened. Attempted murder is still a crime, Derek. So is assault, battery, false imprisonment, and making terrorist threats. And that's just the criminal charges. The civil lawsuit is going to be much more interesting." "Civil lawsuit?" "Oh yes," Keisha said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "See, this isn't just about what you did to me tonight. This is about a pattern of workplace harassment that the company has been ignoring, and now I have proof that it escalated to attempted murder. Do you have any idea what a jury is going to do with that?" Derek seemed to be having trouble breathing. "You can't." "The company, my uncle, your uncle is going to throw you under the bus so fast it'll make your head spin," Keisha said matter-of-factly. "Because when this recording goes public and when the criminal charges are filed, and when the wrongful termination and hostile workplace lawsuits start flying, Peterson Marketing is going to have exactly 2 choices. They can stand by the nephew who tried to commit murder, or they can distance themselves from you and try to salvage what's left of their reputation. What do you want?" Derek asked desperately. "Money? I can get you money? We can work something out." "What I want," Keisha said, her voice still calm but with steel underneath, "is for you to understand that your actions have consequences. You tried to kill me tonight because you thought I was powerless and you were untouchable. You were wrong on both counts." Derek opened his mouth to say something else, but Keisha held up her hand to stop him. "Here's what's going to happen," she continued. "We're going to walk back to the main deck together. You're going to act normal for the rest of this boat ride, and when we get back to shore, you're going to go home and wait for the police to contact you." "The police? Did you think I was going to keep this to myself?" Keisha asked with genuine surprise. "Derek, you just attempted to commit murder. That's not something you apologize for and move on from." But I'm sorry. I really am. I was drunk and I said stupid things, but I wouldn't have actually hurt you." "That recording suggests otherwise," Keisha replied. "And even if you're telling the truth now, the fact remains that you physically assaulted me and threatened to kill me. Those are crimes, Derek. Real crimes with real consequences." Derek looked around desperately as if searching for some escape route or some way to undo what had happened. But there was nowhere to run on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and Keisha had evidence that would be impossible to deny. "Please," he said finally, "my career, my life, everything will be ruined." "Yes," Keisha said simply. "It probably will be. You should have thought about that before you decided to try to murder someone." The sound of laughter and music from the main deck drifted over to them, a stark contrast to the drama that had just unfolded. In a few minutes they would rejoin the party, and Derek would have to pretend that nothing had happened while knowing that his entire world was about to collapse. But first, Keisha had one more thing to say. 3 months later, Keisha sat in her new office, looking out at the bustling streets of downtown Los Angeles. The nameplate on her desk read Keisha Williams, Attorney at Law, and below that, civil rights and employment law. It was a dream she had put on hold when she took the marketing job, but Derek's attack had reminded her of her true calling. The aftermath of that terrible day on the boat had unfolded exactly as she had predicted. The recording had been crystal clear, and Derek's threats had been impossible to deny. Within hours of returning to shore, police had arrested him at his apartment. The charges were serious: attempted murder, assault, battery, false imprisonment, and making terrorist threats. Derek had tried to claim that he was just drunk and joking around, but the recording told a different story. His detailed description of how he would cover up her murder, and his calm discussion of making it look like an accident, showed clear premeditation. The prosecutor had called it one of the most chilling pieces of evidence she had ever heard. The legal proceedings had moved quickly. Derek's uncle had indeed thrown him under the bus, just as Keisha had predicted. Peterson Marketing had immediately fired Derek and issued a public statement condemning his actions. They had also offered Keisha a substantial settlement to avoid a wrongful termination lawsuit, but she had turned it down. Some things were more important than money. Derek had eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a prison sentence of 8 years. His lawyer had argued for a lighter sentence, claiming that alcohol had impaired his judgment, but the judge had been unmoved. The defendant's own words demonstrate a level of planning and malice that is truly disturbing, she had said during sentencing. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated attempt at murder. The case had attracted significant media attention, partly because of the workplace harassment angle, and partly because of the dramatic nature of the attempted murder. Keisha had found herself thrust into the spotlight as an advocate for workplace safety and victims' rights. She had used that platform wisely. Instead of simply telling her story and moving on, Keisha had channeled her experience into meaningful action. She had returned to law school part-time while still working, completing her degree in record time. She had also started speaking at conferences and corporate events about workplace harassment and the importance of taking threats seriously. The speaking engagements had led to consulting work, helping companies develop better policies for handling harassment complaints, and the consulting work had eventually led to enough clients and connections to open her own practice. Keisha's law firm specialized in employment discrimination and civil rights cases, with a particular focus on workplace harassment that had been ignored or covered up by employers. She had already taken on several high-profile cases, and her win rate was impressive. But today was special for a different reason. Today marked exactly 1 year since the incident on the boat, and Keisha was expecting a very important visitor. A knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Her assistant opened the door to reveal a young woman who looked nervous but determined. "Ms. Williams? I'm Angela Torres. I have a 2 o'clock appointment." "Of course, Angela. Please have a seat." Keisha gestured to the comfortable chairs arranged in front of her desk. "Can I get you some water or coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you." As Keisha poured water from the pitcher on her desk, she studied Angela carefully. The young woman had the same look that many of her clients had when they first came to see her. A combination of hope and fear, uncertainty mixed with determination. "Tell me what's going on," Keisha said gently, settling into her chair. Angela took a deep breath. "I work for a tech company in Santa Monica." "Well, I used to work there. They fired me last week." She paused, struggling with the words. "My supervisor has been harassing me for months. Sexual harassment mostly, but also some racial stuff. I'm Latina and he's made comments about that too." Keisha nodded encouragingly. She had heard variations of this story dozens of times over the past year. "I reported it to HR 3 times, Angela continued. "Each time they said they would investigate, but nothing ever happened. And then last week my supervisor said that if I didn't do certain things with him, he would make sure I got fired. I refused, and 2 days later I was out. Do you have any documentation of the harassment or the reports to HR?" Keisha asked. Angela nodded eagerly. "I kept copies of everything. Emails, text messages, even some audio recordings. I started documenting everything after I heard about your case on the news. The story about what happened to you inspired me to start protecting myself." Keisha felt a familiar mix of satisfaction and sadness. She was glad that her experience had helped Angela prepare for this situation, but she was sorry that Angela had needed that preparation in the first place. "You did exactly the right thing," Keisha told her. "Documentation is crucial in cases like this. Let me look at what you have and we'll discuss your options. Over the next hour, Keisha reviewed Angela's evidence. It was comprehensive and damning. The harassment was clearly documented, HR's inadequate response was well established, and the retaliatory firing was obvious. This was exactly the kind of case that Keisha's firm was designed to handle. I'm going to be honest with you, Angela, Keisha said after reviewing everything. This is going to be a difficult process. Employment litigation can take months or even years, and it's going to require you to relive some painful experiences. Are you prepared for that? Angela nodded firmly. I'm prepared. I can't let him do this to someone else. Good, Keisha said with a smile, because with evidence like this, we're going to win. And we're going to make sure your former employer understands that ignoring harassment complaints has serious consequences. After Angela left, Keisha sat back in her chair and reflected on how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been struggling to fit in at a marketing company, trying to overlook microaggressions and hoping that things would get better on their own. Now she was running her own law firm and helping other people fight back against the kind of treatment she had once endured. Derek's attack had been the worst thing that had ever happened to her, but it had also been a turning point. It had forced her to recognize her own strength and had reminded her of her true passion for justice. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her brother. Saw the article about your firm in the Times. Mom and Dad are so proud. We all are. Keisha smiled and put the phone down. The Los Angeles Times article had been published that morning, featuring her firm as part of a series on young entrepreneurs making a difference in their communities. The article had mentioned her background and the incident that had inspired her career change, but it had focused mainly on her current work and future plans. She had plans to expand the firm, bringing in additional attorneys and paralegals to handle the growing caseload. She also wanted to start a non-profit organization that would provide legal services to harassment victims who couldn't afford private attorneys. But perhaps most importantly, Keisha had realized that her experience on that boat had given her something that couldn't be taught in law school. The absolute certainty that fighting for justice was not just her profession, but her calling. Derek was serving his time in state prison, and according to his lawyer, he was not eligible for parole for at least 6 more years. Keisha didn't think about him often anymore, but when she did, she felt a strange mix of emotions. She was grateful that he was no longer able to hurt anyone, but she also felt a kind of pity for the man who had thrown away his entire life because of hatred and entitlement. As the sun set over Los Angeles, Keisha gathered her things and prepared to head home. Tomorrow would bring new clients, new cases, and new opportunities to make a difference. She had learned that the best revenge against people like Derek wasn't anger or hatred. It was success, and the determination to use that success to help others. The scared young woman who had boarded that boat a year ago was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, and more purposeful. Derek had tried to destroy her, but instead he had helped create exactly the kind of person he feared most. Someone with the power and determination to fight back. And Keisha was just getting started.